Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our 8th Made Web Series session of 2021. We're very excited about our featured speaker today. We're lucky to have Emily Pachuta with us. So Emily is the Chief Marketing and Analytics Officer at Invesco, which is a global investment management firm, and where she sets the overall analytics and marketing strategy to accelerate business growth. So today, she'll talk about how they use creativity and data and bring them together to create an awesome user experience, particularly as it relates to Invesco's partnership with the NCAA. So before we get started, definitely want to remind everyone that you should be on mute. Emily will take questions, so feel free to use the chat function if you want to ask one, or if you want to come off mute to ask your question directly, I definitely encourage that. Use the hand raise function, and I'll call on you, and you can take yourself off mute. All right, so with that being said, Emily, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you all for joining at 6 o'clock. I assume it's 6 o'clock at your time. I know for me, it's been a long day, and so I'm really looking forward to a great conversation with all of you and getting a little energy from all of your great questions and thoughts. So like Sarah said, we are going to talk about that intersection of creativity and data and how those are really the essential ingredients, right? If you think about like a recipe, they're the essential ingredients for having an amazing user digital experience. And so we're going to talk about two things today. One is, I'll say a little bit more academic. So why do you need to bring these two things together, and what does that mean? And how does it actually benefit a business to do that? And then, I think case studies are a lot of fun. And as Sarah said, we do have a great partnership with the NCAA. And so I think that'll be really interesting to explore how we brought together creativity and data and really learned by bringing those two things together to create and continuously improve experiences. And so, I think, as you're listening, think about the most amazing digital experiences that you have had. It could be your banking app, it could be a news site, it could be a great mobile game that you play. Those things don't just happen. They happen because the people who put those things together and create them really understand, who is their audience, who are they making it for. They understand what they want the person to do or how to make it an easier experience for them to deposit a check, for example, or something like that. And then they're always measuring to understand how to continuously make the experience better and better for the user. That's really, what you would call client-centric design, and that brings together creativity and data. So, why do this? I've thought a lot. I sort of grew up as a writer, right? I mean, I started more on the creative side, not on the data side. And so, when you're very creative, you'll often have amazing breakthrough experiences, right? They could be more beautiful. They could be more disruptive or surprising, but they often aren't personalized, right? So think about it as, you create this breakthrough experience, but it's same to everyone. But the thing about what data and analytics gives you, it gives you precision. It really gives you precision. And so you really need those two things, because marketing that's driven exclusively by creativity, no personalization, marketing driven exclusively by data, really doesn't have a strong emotional or breakthrough connection. And certainly, being in the industry, for a pretty extensive period of time, I've seen it really wildly shift, where it was all I don't know if y'all are familiar with the TV show Mad Men, but it was all very Mad Men for a long period of time. And everybody's like, oh my God, marketing costs so much, we better measure return on investment. And it swung wildly to data. And now I think we're finding a really nice and happy medium that is really ultimately the definition of modern marketing. And so, this is the business reason why you do it. So this comes from a McKinsey study. For those of you who aren't familiar with McKinsey is a management consulting firm. They consult with industries of all ilks and all over the world. So they often have a very, very good sense of trends and why you do things to drive business growth. And what this chart here shows is a perfect union, right? So if people aren't really driving their execution from a data perspective, they call them idlers, right? We might call them old-fashioned, right? The madmen. And then those who are really isolators, right? They don't integrate the two together. They use one or the other. They're a little bit more successful. They see a little bit greater growth, but not as much as those who actually bring it all together. And I think it's very important for those of you who are interested in a career in marketing. You do need that specialist expertise and perspective that marketers bring to a business, but you also need to be thinking about business results. And I think this is a perfect example of how really modern marketing execution can drive business results and growth. So we talk a lot at Invesco about being client-centric. And I think most companies do, and they think that they are. But most of them are actually not. Most of them are actually extremely focused on what they want to accomplish. And even when they're designing digital experiences, they're very focused on what they want the user to do, as opposed to what the user is actually doing. And so we really are using data to be truly client-centric and responsive. I call it really responsive to what the client is doing. And we'll talk a little bit about that in some of the case studies in a moment. But data and humanity are really kind of two sides of the same coin, right? As we talked about in the prior slide, right? You have to bring them together. And so we think about how this works as like a wheel, right? The client sits in the middle, and you want to really better understand everything you can about your client through data and analytics and research. But research plays a role at every stage of this sort of virtuous circle that you see here. It can inform strategy and messaging. It can inform your creative approach, which you'll see in a moment. It can inform how and where you distribute your experience. And by distribute, I mean, do you put it in a mobile app? Is it get carried by a salesperson, right? In our business, we sell investment products, and we do that through a variety of sales channels. So is it carried by a person, right? You have a lot of decisions you need to make. And then ultimately, you want to understand how you did, right? What are your metrics? And what is the client experience with your digital platform? So this is really, I think of it as a virtuous circle of how data analytics, research, and the creative components all work together on behalf of the client. So let's talk a little bit about our partnership with the NCAA. I don't know if there's any college sports fans out there, but we really did try to be impossible to ignore during March Madness, and you'll be seeing more of Invesco and Invesco QQQ, across all sports, but certainly as we go into college football season. And so this is a really exciting partnership for us, and atypical, frankly, for Invesco and for asset managers in general. But we did enter into it, and I'll give you a little bit of the reason why we did. It's a full-year partnership across all sports, as I said, and it really gave us an opportunity to do 4 things that were very important to us. The first was to engage clients, right? So clients, like all of us, right? They have a strong affiliation with their alma mater. They might have played sports. Financial services tends to over-index with former college athletes, and certainly, we know that everyone loves to watch college basketball. I mean, it's rare that you walk into an office of a wealth manager or financial services company where it's not playing in the background, right? And I can remember times being at different firms where they begged you to please go to a conference room to watch the game so that you weren't streaming off the internet that the companies had. So like everyone loves it. And so client engagement was really important to us. It gives us enough opportunity to involve our employees. So for example, this year where there were no fans, we did virtual pep rallies and things like that with our own employees, and we did bracketology and things like that. So it was great. It was a great morale booster, frankly. And I think the pandemic has been really hard on people. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a real morale booster. The third thing that was important to us, and we're really going to go deep into this in one of the case studies, is involvement in the communities. And specifically, we have an exclusive partnership with the NCAA around financial education. And so some of you may be aware that because of name, image, and likeness rules changing, now college athletes can actually make some money, finally, in terms of jersey sales and appearances and things like that, and not lose their college and Division I status. So really, really important there, that if it wasn't important already, important to bring forward financial education and literacy. And then the last piece is to really raise awareness of Invesco and Invesco QQQ, with Invesco being the official asset manager of the NCAA, and Invesco QQQ is the official ETF of the NCAA. And so, we did a lot of really interesting things. I'm going to dive deep into a few of the executions. But, for those of you who don't know, Invesco QQQ is an ETF that invests in the NASDAQ 100. So the innovative companies that many of you know and love, all in one ETF, like Apple and Google and Peloton and Amazon. And it's one of the most widely owned ETFs by all sorts of people, right? And in fact, what's amazing about it, I was talking about this with a reporter during March Madness, it's people know they own it, right? I've interviewed people for jobs, and they're like, "Oh, I own the Qs," and it's like, so it's almost like it has fans, just like sports does. And so it's a really innovative product, and everything that we did in terms of our execution was about innovation. So the theme of the campaign was Agents of Innovation. So how, by being an investor, you are actually propelling innovation forward. But everything we did and how we did it, where we placed our ads, where we placed our digital experiences, was innovative in and of itself. So, for example, we had an AR game that featured Grant Hill, the famous basketball player, as a narrator, right? So, like we even our execution was thematically aligned, right, a bit with what the product is, which is giving you access to the innovators of the NASDAQ 100. So I'm going to start to walk through a few case studies, right? So how does this all come together when it comes time to do execution? So this first case study is really about optimization. Okay, so this was our landing page, right? So for those of you who might not be familiar with what a landing page is if you send somebody from a digital ad, for example, and they click on it, it sent them here. And the purpose of this landing page was to get people to really understand Invesco QQQ as a product, some of the holdings underneath of the companies. But, we also wanted to make sure, because it was for the NCAA March Madness, that it was fun, right? It wasn't too serious. And so we observed, right, remember, March Madness is a very limited window of time, very intense, and we had a lot of visitors, so we had a lot of data that we could analyze. And the performance of the page was actually fine. It was really on par with other landing pages that we had developed for Invesco QQQ. So there wasn't really a problem per se. But we also knew that we had so much traffic, it was an opportunity actually for experimentation. And so what we wanted to do, so I'll give you two sample things that we did, and it's called A/B testing, right? So think about it as like when you go to the eye doctor, they're like, do you like this C or do you like this C? And that's exactly what the A/B testing lets you do. And we wanted to determine what performed better. And by performance, it meant engagement, deeper engagement than just going to the landing page. It meant scrolling deeper on the page. It might have meant clicking on one of the other experiences. And so that's what we did here. And we just basically evaluated the page behavior. We built hypotheses. We changed orientation of what went where. And eventually, you summarize your learnings, and you can carry those learnings forward to other campaigns. So that's one example. So I call that optimization with A/B testing. Okay, so this is also more on the optimization piece. So here we did swapping out of imagery. This is a little bit more detail. on swapping out of imagery. So one of the things was we had a static image, right? So that's the before. And then after, we actually had that innovation in motion graphic move, right? So it started to move, and we teased Grant Hill up higher on the page so that when you're above the fold, as it were, you started to see him, and it maybe wouldn't make you want to scroll down. And so here, what we saw was by doing those two changes, you'll see that our bounce rate improved. So people stayed on the page, right? That improved by 20% almost. And then what we saw was relative increases on mobile, right? So people coming from display ads on their phones, that you actually saw more people click through to that innovation in motion because it was moving. They wanted to see what was going on. And you saw 78% higher engagement with the AR game. So really great results, right? And again, it just shows how making little changes can really improve your engagement. Okay, so now we'll talk a little bit about the innovation behind the game gallery. So what this was to, so innovations behind the game were really about bringing forward companies that are part of the NASDAQ 100 and putting them in the context of what they do for sports. So think about Microsoft, right? Microsoft is one of the companies in the queues. And so using the tablets, right? And so we had really interesting animated tablets and descriptions of how Microsoft, for example, works with sports teams through the tablet. And so again, you know, this was another situation where we didn't really have a problem, right? The engagement metrics were quite on par. But again, we knew that we could do better. And so here too, we brought motion forward, right? So this was another case where we realized that by demonstrating that there was something dynamic behind, right? If you click through, that would increase engagement, especially for mobile. And so again, here again, we saw the bounce rate improving and the click-through rate into the gallery, and then from the gallery to the About Invesco QQQ pages also really improved. So again, little changes, but now we know something, right? Based on these two examples, we did see that movement on the page really makes people curious, makes them curious. So the combination of celebrity in the last one and movement in this case, movement, bringing motion into the experience from the get-go does make people curious. Okay, so this one is really about functionality. So all of us are used to most things on a page being live, doing something, right? And so we had Invesco QQQ, the thing that's there in the little red square with the NCAA logo. It didn't really do anything. You'd click on it and it would just refresh the page that you were on. But people wanted something more. They were probably, our hypothesis was that they actually were looking for product information, or they wanted to learn more about the product. And so that's what we did, right? Instead of it just refreshing the page, we had to go from the home page to the product page. And what we saw was that you saw a lot more time spent and you saw a lot more visitors move on. So that was really very interesting also, which means that the entire page has to have function and purpose. I would say that was our takeaway from this. And look, this was a very different audience for us, a very consumer audience, probably an audience that wasn't that familiar with the company or that familiar even with Invesco QQQ per se. So putting yourself in that mindset and understanding that they're curious and they want to learn more, that means that everything has to let them do that. And so that was a really interesting learning for us there as well. So I'm going to take a pause because this was all about the digital experience as it relates to the NCAA. I'm going to pivot now to the financial education program, which hasn't launched. So this was about optimization, what I just talked about, really optimization learning in campaign. What I'm talking about now is the development process and what's the role of data and research in that intersection into creativity, and how does it inform creativity? So Sarah, I don't know if there are any questions, but maybe I'll just take a pause and see if people do have questions, because it's a very different set of cases now than those that were more about, I'll say, technical optimization.
Okay, any questions? There's none in the chat, but does anyone have anything that they want to put in the chat? Oh, Lupe, are you raising your hand, or are you not? Okay, you're not. Okay.
Okay, terrific. Well, I'll move on. And again, ask me anything, any questions. I know some of this can get a little bit technical, but I'm trying to also roll it up as to the specifics are important, but it's like, what do you take away from that? And so now let me move on, right? And as I said, this is going to be much more about how research, data, and creativity come together in the development of the process. Okay, so we have, as I said, an opportunity to bring forward a really exciting financial education program that's designed really for college students. And we're planning to launch it in November 2021. And as I said, it really is part of our agreement, and one of the reasons that the partnership with the NCAA was so interesting to us. It was really important for us, and the reason why research and data has played such an important role at every step. I have a colleague who says you don't want to be dad at the disco with this one, right? I mean, you really do have to make sure that we are really in the mindset, like we want to deliver what college students want, not what typically financial services do when it comes to education, which is same to all, right? Remember how we talked earlier about creativity? Too much creativity can be same to all. You need a little bit of data and precision to be really relevant to your audience. And so it is really critical here. We are not college students. We can't pretend to be college students. For me, it's been a long time since I was in college. And so we have to be listening every step of the way. So this was really about the development process. And we, on the left-hand side are sort of three places or areas that have allowed us to learn. So the first is research studies with college students. And we actually have a community, or a panel, it's called, a research panel online of college students that we can put things in front of all the time for input around this learning experience. The second thing that we wanted to do was we wanted to make sure that we were being very culturally relevant and sensitive. So at Invesco, we have these things called business resource groups. These are groups of diverse employees who, they could be our Invesco Black Professional Network, our Invesco Women's Network, our Pride Network, et cetera. And we are always seeking feedback from them in terms of how we are bringing our different characters forward in the game. And then finally, we work with a company who is truly a learning specialist, right? They do digital learning platforms for all sorts of companies and all sorts of audiences. And they really understand how people learn through games. Okay, and so all of these inputs have shaped the things that you see here: subject matter, how we're delivering the game, what are features and functionality, what's the creative platform, and all of that has been shaped by qualitative and quantitative research. And so let's talk about the subject matter. So there's going to be 8 core subjects, and we've taken a really student-centric approach in terms of both the learning objectives and then also how we bring forward the challenges that they might face in these scenarios. And so here you'll see the 8 core subject matters. They are very much framed within the context of real life scenarios and real life goals that people might have, college students might have at that particular moment. So for example, one of the scenarios is a young man who is sitting outside waiting to spend money on a sneaker drop. And, really realizing that, maybe finally realizing that maybe it's best not to spend the money there when he weighs his wants and his needs from a savings perspective. And then, at the end, we want to leave the students with money secrets. So 5 of them: how to borrow smart, understand that everything you buy has an opportunity cost, that you can earn money while you sleep if you are investing. You have to save in case things go awry or sideways and then you always need to pay yourself first. And so that's really important. So there's these money secrets that the students can walk away with. And then, like I said, these are the 8 sort of big questions that we heard from college students that they really had about money. So this is the delivery method. So as I mentioned, it's an online, mobile first. It's called edutainment. Actually, that's the term of art for the experience. It's self-guided. The players can play and learn at their own pace, and it's a real mix of video, infographics, and choice-based play. So the creative platform, the game is called How Not to Suck at Money. Again, something that probably you wouldn't expect a company to come forward with in terms of language, but we really do want to meet the students and speak the way they speak to themselves, to each other. We tested the title because, frankly, it was a little bit of a eyebrow raiser, both for us and the NCAA. And students were incredibly appreciative, actually, to be spoken with and not at. And so we have a lot of confidence in the title and the overall tone and manner. We're working with an illustrator named Jose Mendez, and he's really a very well-known, you don't know his name, but you know his work. He does a lot of work for Coke and other brands, very heavy in the social media space. And so it just really feels like a very creative, almost fantasy kind of environment, but it has real life application. And then the way the narrative is going to work, the narrator is actually the student's future self. And again, we tested that construct with students because personally I found it a little confusing. No one else found it confusing, right? Like they completely understood that this was a very nice and gentle way to be guided through the experience. And they actually liked that they were getting a chance to meet their future self, and like they really got it. And I think that's it speaks again to the audiences are real digital natives, and they're frankly game playing natives as well, like digital game playing natives as well. So a lot of the things that maybe we thought would add complexity actually created interest for the students. This is sort of our, how we're thinking about ongoing audience engagement. So where are we now? It's July, we're in prototype. We're putting prototypes in front of our panels and in front of other users. We want to make sure that it continues to be as intuitive as we think it is. We'll have a much more formed, like sort of alpha version in September that will also go into testing. Beta version right before launch, that's like an almost fully baked. And then we will launch in November. But the thing is then it's not done, right? I mean, this is, first of all, it's just the first 8 chapters. We'll learn a tremendous amount, both about the gameplay itself, but also about how we activate the game, right? So, just because we build this amazing game doesn't mean that anybody's gonna, use it. And so we have all sorts of activation channels that we're using, including social media influencers. We have partnerships with certain universities where we're really partnered, and we can actually use their logos and things like that as part of the marketing efforts. And we're doing something that's very different for us, which is on-campus activation, like really being on campus and trying to figure out what are the right places for us to be, to meet the students where they are, when they have the mental availability to be thinking about their finances, right? Because that's, catching them, on a Friday night on the way to the frat is not a time when they have mental availability to be thinking about their finances. But so we're really going deep with the universities and the students communities within the universities to figure out on-campus activation, which, like I said, is very, very new for us. So look, these are the key takeaways, and Sarah, I did try to keep to about 30 minutes, which is what we said, so that we have a good chance for questions. So I think hopefully you have some takeaways here, which is no matter where you're leaning within marketing, right? So a lot of people get into marketing because they like the advertising side. You're going to need to learn how to understand data and ask the right questions of your research partners and of your data analytical partners. If you're somebody who's really into marketing science, that's amazing. You can have an amazing career in marketing, but just understand that some of what you want to inform is the creative process. And so because it's those two things together that are really sort of the essence of where marketing is today. And actually, when you think about marketing, you're looking to change behavior, right? Human behavior. And so it really does take both those things. And then, like I gave you some really, really specific examples, right? The impact of research can be micro, right? Like improving a click rate or improving time on page. Those feel really small, but they add up to something very important as it relates to your ability to engage with your prospective client. And then some of the things are really big, right? When you're using research and data to inform, game design and things like that, that's really big impact. So it's big and small, and all is important. So hopefully this was interesting and you have some key takeaways here. I always think it's important to walk away with something that you might do differently or think differently tomorrow. So hopefully the big idea here was that you do need both the creativity and the data to come together. So Sarah, maybe we'll do questions. And I think I'm going to stop sharing, I think, Sarah. And if somebody wants to talk about a slide, that's great. We can pop it back up, but I'll stop sharing just so I can see everybody.
Yes, there is a question in the chat. I do want to actually sneak in here and ask one really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
So I think you brought up a really great point in your key takeaway that people who do data need to be creative and people who are creative need to understand data. So can you talk a little bit more about how a student can prepare themselves in both areas to be, a future marketer?
Yeah, no, that's really a wonderful question, Sarah. So like I said, creatives need to be really curious about the user, right? It's not creativity for creativity's sake. Mara has known me for a long time. We're not in the award-winning business, right? We're in the client engagement business. And so people often will do these amazing, amazing campaigns, and they're kind of doing it to like win the big awards, right? Like that's not it. And so you have to really want to apply science, which I would say is really understanding who are you doing this for, right? Who are you designing for? Who are you writing for? Who are you putting this TV spot together for? So, and if you know that, then you're already bringing science or data into the equation. The other piece is if you're in the creative space, metrics matter, measurement matters. And so you don't just design these things and then walk away and go design something else. Like, what were you trying to, who are you trying to reach, and what do you want them to do based on what you've designed for them? And so I think that's written for them. So I think that's really, really important. It's less about becoming a data scientist. You don't have to do that, but you need to be mindful of who's it for, and do you know everything you need to be personalized? And then how are you measuring? What do you want the person to do as a result of engaging your experience? So that's the one side of the house. For people who are in data science, look, this is a really highly prized skill set. Every industry is looking for data science. Every industry is looking for people who can help them with natural language processing, that can help them with segmentation, who can help them with predictive modeling, right? Like think of the Amazon experience, right? The Amazon experience is all data science driven. So that's really needed. I think that the most successful data scientists, though, really understand business. They understand business objectives. So it's not theoretical, it's not academic data science, it's practical data science. And they're good partners with their creatives, because they do need to work together. And so where you see high functioning organizations, you get both together. So we're lucky at Invesco. They're all in the organization that we call Insights, Analytics, and Marketing. So my creatives and my data scientists and my researchers, like they all remotely sit together, but they all work together. And I think it's really helpful in that regard that they're not in separate parts of the company where it might be a little harder to work together.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
So Richard has a question. Richard, do you want to come off mute and ask it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Hey.
I appreciate it. Hi. Thank you so much for that presentation. I love the artwork. I know you mentioned the artist's name, but I already forgot it.
Jose Mendez, yeah.
Jose Mendez. Okay, I'll definitely write that down. I was kind of curious. You touched upon this a little bit. But I was kind of curious how the different functional parts of the team, like for example, like the creative side, and then to maybe even like a translational role into like the data science side.
So
like how do you work through all that jargon? Because I know every different subsection of the team has their own like their terminology, their ideas. Like how does that look, I guess, in this team in general?
Yeah, so I love that question because in our insights and analytics team, which is where our data scientists live, we actually have a team of people that they interface with the business, right? So they might interface with sales, they might interface with marketers. And when we were originally planning those roles, we called them translators, right? Because they're people who understand enough about data science to be dangerous, and they understand enough about the business to be able to take the things that business people say, which is, I wish I knew ... and they're able to take that and translate that into a data science problem to be solved. So the roles exist actually, and so they tend to be viewed as almost like relationship manager roles, et cetera, but they really are translators.
Thank you. Yeah, because I kind of feel like I'm sitting in that position right now to some degree, but it's cool.
But that's cool. I mean, like it's super needed, right? I think that's the way you bridge the two groups. You bridge them that way. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Richard. All right. So Joanna, you had a question in the chat. Do you want to come off mute and ask it? If not, I can just read it out, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to. No, are you shy today? That's all right if you are. So I'll read her question now. It's actually back when you were talking about A/B testing.
Yeah.
So so she's looking for how you made the decisions when it came to doing A/B testing. How did you decide like how many people in each group, and did you have like a gut feeling about what would do better?
Yeah, so it was live A/B testing, right? So think of it as it's served up randomly, right? An equal number of times, but randomly. And so it wasn't like we did it as a research test. It was a live experience. The experience was live. And so we were doing optimization in real time in campaign. So that's the first thing. We did have a hypothesis, right? I think it's, we all use digital properties, right? We had a sense that if something moved, people would be more likely to click on it. Certainly, I think, all of us were a little sheepish with the, Invesco PPQ and NCAA logo that we didn't think to make it go somewhere. Like we were also like, oh, that was dumb, and so but again, this was, I think we had something, Mara, maybe you remember, I think we had 135 or 140 different campaign elements for March Madness, right? So you're going to miss one, right? But it was really, so that was it, the Grant Hill piece, again, once it happened, right? Once you realize that if you put Grant's little face or part of his face there, that people might scroll down and be like, oh, what's Grant Hill doing here? Once that happened and we saw the results, we were like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But again, you'll learn. Like this is what happens. You can't think of everything all the time, and that's what's great about being able to do in campaign optimization is literally we did it and we turned it on and then we moved on. We moved on to the next optimization.
Okay. Oh, Richard, you got another question.
Yeah, I was kind of curious. I wanted to follow up on that. Is there like a industry standard for the A/B testing split? Like in percentage?
Numbers?
Yeah, I guess like if it's like a 30-70 or like a 40-60.
Oh, when do you think it's better? Is that what you mean? Like, how do you know one's the winner?
No, more so in terms of like, I guess like when you're doing the A/B testing, is it like a 50-50 split, like audience one, audience two?
You try to do that. That's right.
Oh,
like
okay.
It's random but equal, right? So you really do try to get equal numbers so that you're not, I don't know, overweighting one group or another. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Genevieve, you have a question. Do you want to come off mute? If not, I'll ask it. No worries. Just want to give you the opportunity. Okay. If not, I will ask it. No worries. So she wants to know if there are marketing data analytics books or podcasts that you recommend because she wants to learn more about it.
That's interesting. So Genevieve, nothing comes to mind immediately, but I can certainly maybe through Sarah, does that work, right? I can send a couple of things and maybe a couple of articles that might be helpful. I just want to make sure that like things get really technical really fast in this space. And I don't like if it's not really what your core competency is, I just want to make sure that I'm sending things that are, I don't know, user friendly, right? In terms of being able to understand. I think obviously if you're interested in doing data analytics, like there is what you can self-teach, right? I mean, you can do Python, you can do a lot of things. You can teach yourself how to do the technical side. But that would be my only comment. But Sarah, I'll send you a few things.
Sure, that's great. Thank you. So Joanna has another question, and it's a great one. So do you start with data generally and then use it to inform creative, or do you start with creative and analyze the data related to the established creative and then make
that's an awesome question. Chicken or egg, right? So that's a great question. So what I would say is we really do try to start with understanding the audience first. So that's not data per se, like it's not data science. It's really understanding everything that we can about the audience. So for example, I've mentioned to you that the theme of the work that we do around Invesco QQQ is agents of innovation. So it takes the investor, it puts them in the middle of the innovation in really funny ways, right? And so, we have somebody who pops out of a driverless car that's on a test track and things like that. Like, so it's really about putting the investor in QQQs at the center of innovation. So why did we come up with that? Well, we had done research with investors about why they owned the Qs. And access to innovation, or the innovative companies of the NASDAQ 100, was the primary reason why they did that, and the fact that the ETF has performed so well over many, many years. And so we were like, well, there's really something interesting about that. Like, they want the access to the innovation. They think they're innovators. They think they're innovators because they're investing. And that's where the idea came from. Now, then we tested it, and we tested different iterations of creative. In fact, we're developing new creative for fall football. And, we put the ad copy through now. I think this is the third or fourth time, and we continue to take feedback and refine and make it clear and everything else. And so, but it starts with that, like really kind of understanding the motivations and behaviors of the person you're trying to influence. And then we start from there. And then we really do bring in research and data science into that after that.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Emily? I know I have one more. So
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit more about your background and your career path? Because I think it's so interesting. You mentioned that you started more in like the writing space, and how now Chief Marketing and Analytics Officer. So how did you get there?
Yeah, so I'm definitely the poster person for not having a straightforward path, right? And so I actually went to college, and then I went to film school at NYU. So my plan was to be a screenwriter or filmmaker. I was a teaching assistant for the head of the department, and I went to Russia and shot a documentary as my thesis. So like I was not doing anything at all related to financial services. I didn't even know what a stock was. Like that was not my world. And then I came back from Russia, I cut my film, I graduated, I worked at Good Morning America for a while as a booker. And so when you think about that, that's all about like finding stories, right? Getting interesting little, whether they're personal stories or serious stories, like filmed and on TV, right? And it was a great job. I loved it. It was a terrible time to be working in New York and in that industry, So then I was married. I took time off. I had 2 kids. They're, grown up now. One's, in college, one's going for her PhD, right? So I took time off to have my kids. And at a certain point, I was pretty bored, and I met somebody through my daughter's preschool who worked at Merrill Lynch. And she's like, oh, come in and talk to me. And it wasn't for a job. It was like, I just wanted to figure out like how I could take things that I knew I was good at, which is storytelling and writing, and turn that into something. But by the time we met, they needed somebody who could write and edit part-time. It was perfect for me. And then I joked that I worked part-time for 2 weeks. And after that, like it all started, because I really grew to love the purpose behind why financial services companies exist, right? And I really do believe that if you manage money well and you help people manage money well, it unlocks their ability to fulfill the dreams they have for themselves and their families. And that's a really, really important purpose that sometimes you forget. And so I really loved the business, and I happened to be at Maryland for a really interesting time. I had exposure to a broad range of different types of marketing, digital content. I ran the creative group at one point, which were all the designers. And so I just had an opportunity in PR to experience a lot of things, and it made me a really strong, what I call generalist marketer, which is great. You can really get a lot of experiences by being open to learning lots of different dimensions of marketing. I went from different firms, dove deep into other things. Stood up a client research organization, an insurance company that really was focused more on product development than on marketing per se. So that was really interesting. Worked at BlackRock for several years, which is how I met Mara. And then came over to Invesco as a CMO. And again, I've always been really fascinated by the data side. I am not a data scientist. I am not. But I've always tried to ask the right questions of the data scientists, right? And so I'm really focused on asking the right questions. So that's sort of how I got here, and it's not a direct route at all. I would just say for all of you, as you're thinking about your careers, like the best thing you can do is to be open to new things, right? You think you know what you want to do, right? I was certain I was going to win an Oscar, right? Like I was going to be a screenwriter. I was going to live in California. I was going to win an Oscar, right? Like none of those things happened. But some of the things that always made me happy, which was like listening to people and finding their stories. And like I get to do that every day, right? I really do get to do that every day, whether it's through the work or just frankly managing a big team, right? Like that's part of the job too, is like really listening to people, caring about people and helping them be their best. So just be super open as life comes to you, because there will be things that you didn't expect that are opportunities, and you shouldn't necessarily just shut them down because it's not what you thought you wanted to do. So anyway, very, very different. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Richard commented straight facts. Yeah, he supports that. So that's great. There's another question that came in through the chat. So Pauline wants to know, how does controversy hinder or help in marketing? So she's specifically referencing Sha'Carri Richardson and, everything that she's going through right now. And, you would think that maybe she'd be dropped from different sponsorship opportunities, but actually Beats by Dre and other companies have picked her up to promote her. So is this a special case, or do you think this is going to be more common in the future?
So look, I think that's a super interesting case study. And I'll give you my view on her sort of, but more about we talked about sort of the secret sauce and creativity and data. There's a secret sauce, I think, to getting over bad publicity. So first of all, she was very human throughout. Like the whole thing was, she was so human. She wasn't angry. She didn't rail against, the USA track and field. She didn't rail against the Olympics. Like she just accepted the situation. She explained it. She explained what had happened. And then she just accepted it, right? And I think she was so transparent and humble. Like, how could you be upset, right? That's irrespective if you think it was a ridiculous rule to begin with. She could have railed on how ridiculous that rule was, but she didn't, right? She just understood the rules, understood what happened, accepted it. And think about how horrible that is for her, how hard she's worked for all these years. She would have absolutely been the face of track and field, not just for the US, but for the Olympics, right? Because she is such a compelling and interesting person. But I think there's something about how you handle yourself, right, that matters, right? I would say it's the integrity, right, of how she handled herself that was really important. And I think that's very much why she's not losing sponsors, she'll gain sponsors as a result. Now, she also didn't do anything really, really horrible, right? I think, you know, when people do things really horrible, it's very hard to recover. And I think particularly now, you know, it's called cancel culture for a reason, right? There's a, you know, social media is powerful. People can sit behind anonymity and do and say anything that they want. It's a really tough environment. And so for companies like us that, you know, like we're a financial services company, like we really, we have to have the highest standards of integrity, right? And so, you know, just, you know, we talked a little bit about the NCAA. It was really nerve-wracking for us. I mean, Grant Hill, no one has a bad word to say about Grant Hill, but starting to work with celebrities is scary, right? You know, so we use Greg Gumbel in the ads, and like, but you do have to take a little bit of that risk in order to be relevant. But I think it's a great question. I don't consider hers a controversy thing. I think it was how she handled herself. So.
Yeah, and
Joanna, and the Colin Kaepernick thing is, so I see Joanna direct Colin Kaepernick, right? Like that's a very strange situation, right? I mean, one could say that Colin Kaepernick unlocked a lot of really wonderful things as it relates to conversations and about race and systemic racism in the country. And but wow, like it's from the career that he thought he was going to do, which is an NFL quarterback, it was disastrous for him as a spokesperson on race. Well, maybe he found a different calling, right? You could also say, because he's been incredibly impactful there, and certainly Nike, you know, and his partnership with Nike has been, I think, really strong and quite profound.
Great. So Chantia, you have a question you want to come off mute and ask it?
Yeah, sure. So my question was more to do with when you started talking about like your background and like kind of when you have like an idea of where you want your life and like career to go, but that's not always where it ends up. And I often like feel like I'm passionate about a lot of different things around like social media and marketing and stuff. So I'm still trying to like weigh out what I love more. So I wanted to know like how does it look when a person is like, I don't want to say like jumping from like job to job, but like maybe like you have this opportunity that you got for a job and you're enjoying your time there, but you still want to like explore more and like try out different things. Do you think like it's a bad look to be like having all these different jobs and stuff?
So look, I think, you know, maybe I'll approach that from a little different perspective. And it's a really wonderful question. So one of the things that, as you guys are thinking about where you're going to work first, right? I do want to encourage you to realize that it's a two-way street. And you may feel like you have to take the first thing that comes your way. And I get it, like you don't want your parents to have to keep paying for stuff and all this kind of thing, you know, like, and you want to start to build a career. But you really need to think a lot about the culture of the company that you're interviewing with. And does it feel like a place where, one, you can bring your whole self to the role, where you'll be respected, where there's psychological safety in terms of speaking your mind and giving opinions. Like it all has to feel like it's right for you. It's not just the job. So that's the first thing I would say. And it's related to the second thing, which is jumping from company to company, I think, you know, is probably not frowned upon as much as it used to be, but it still does, strikes a little bit odd. What you want to try to do is go to a place where there'll be an openness for you to move within the company and experience things within the construct of the company. That's ideal. That's really ideal. And so even if you're, let's say, you know, you said social media, and then you spoke about marketing, which I'm going to assume means more of a generalist marketing capability. You know, even if you go to an agency, you could go to an agency that's big enough to have both of those capabilities, and therefore you could spend some time in social media for a couple of years and then, you know, transfer to another part of the agency. And certainly the same is true in companies who have marketing organizations. Like social media is a big part of marketing now. And so anyway, so that would be my guidance, is less about jumping from company to company. One, find a company that's a cultural fit for you, where you see an ability to grow, and it gives you the opportunity potentially to experience new things within the company.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you, Chantia. Any other questions before we wrap it up? Doesn't look like anything else is coming through on the chat. So I just want to say another huge thanks to Emily. Yes, thank you for your terrific and engaging presentation. It really was amazing to hear how you drive digital engagements using both creativity and data. And I love the examples you used. So exciting, so fun. So thank you for that. We recorded today's session, everyone. So if you want to rewatch it, we'll be posting it to our website next week. And our next session will be on Wednesday, August 4th at 6 p.m. With the team at See Her. So you may have seen commercials featuring the See Her initiative, and their mission is to increase accurate portrayals of women and girls in media. They work with top business executives like people like Katie Couric and Busy Phillips to make their mission a reality. So you'll definitely want to hear what they're working on. And yeah, that's it. So thank you, everyone. It was so great to see you. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.